Hello. Hi.
I can hear you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks. So, I saw your story on TikTok, and
Mhm.
I thought, being somebody that has worked with mental health patients a lot, I thought, it's really important for people to be talking about that stuff openly,
Right.
in hopes that maybe you'd be able to help somebody else. So, whenever you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to share your story
Oh, like the whole thing?
if you're comfortable.
Um, basically, like a lot of people have been commenting on my video to begin with, like the backstory to why she did it and like what happened like to me as a kid. And basically, my mom had schizophrenia. So she also had manic bipolar and a lot of other problems. And she was also a drug addict. So I was in custody with my dad most of the time, and then the month on, month off thing when I was a kid. And basically, I just, as a kid, remember seeing the drug world and see everyone around me do that, and then having to go home to a normal environment and go to school the next day after watching my mom overdose multiple times. And she self harmed quite a bit when she was like still alive. And it's just as a kid, you see those things and you think it's normal. And when I would go to school and I would talk to people, they would always talk about their parents like so normal, like, oh, my mom's taking me to this or my mom's taking me to that. My mom was the type of person to take my money to go leave me somewhere and go to Detroit. So I love her to death. Like, I wouldn't say any different. I put her on like a pedestal. Like, she was she was my mom, like to me it was, I don't know any different. So I just kind of watched. And growing older, my dad would always be super, super strict. And we lived in a very Catholic, all A's, you don't get to do anything, you don't get to have a sleepover until you get an A in this class. I got sent to private school, just like a lot of very extreme differences. And my dad is a 15-year military veteran, so I also was sent to boot camp multiple times after my mom's death, and it was just awful. But watching my mom do those things to her, I didn't know what to do. Like, there was this one specific time she was in the bathroom for the longest time, and I was a little girl and I was like, why, like, the only bathroom in there. So I go in to check on her and there's blood everywhere, and I'm like 8 years old, and I'm like, mom, are you okay? And she just had gashes like on her neck, and she did that to herself because she had an episode. And at the time I didn't know what that was, and a lot of times she would shut herself in the bathroom when she was about to have an episode or whatever. But my sister, I have a half sister, I never really saw her a lot during my life because she has a different dad. But sometimes, because she's 5 years older than me, sometimes she would come around to see me. And anytime something like that happened, she would call her parents and leave me there. And she would always tell me not to tell the social workers because mom would be taken away. And my mom has a history of assault charges against her, and she was in and out of jail a lot. It was just the wrong crowd to begin with. So it made my dad try extra hard to not lead me down that path, and it turned into like very weird circumstances. I don't even know. This is so much. I haven't even told anybody the whole story. But my mom, when I was 10, um I went over to say hi for the weekend, and the day before she died, I was there, and I was supposed to stay the whole weekend. And I remember her just sleeping the entire weekend, and she had bipolar, so it was normal to be like super outgoing and let's do stuff to like just sleeping. Now that I'm older, I realize that. But she was just having a really bad weekend, and she had called my grandparents to come pick me up for some reason. And I remember begging her. I was like, no, I want to stay with you. Like, I never get to see you. You're never here. She's like, no, honey, you need to go today, but I love you. And she hugged me so much. She was talking to me for hours on the porch just before my grandparents picked me up. And I didn't think it was weird at first, but it was definitely a little more bizarre. She like it was out of the norm to talk to me for that long. And I just remember her saying like, your dad was going to take care of you. And like at 10 years old, you're like, okay, yeah, like I'm going to see you in 2 weekends. And then I went to my grandparents' house and I was in the car looking back and she was just standing there. But at the time, like I didn't think of anything. And I just remember being at my grandparents' house and I came out of the room and I saw the police talking to my grandpa on the porch. And they came in and my grandma was like, because I told my grandma, and they all came in. She's like, you need to stay in the room, like stay here until I call for you. So I stayed there for about an hour listening to them. And I heard the word killed themselves because of illnesses. And I immediately thought of my uncle because he had kidney failure. He had 3 kidney transplants already, and that is my grandma's son. So that's what I thought of. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he killed himself, at 10 years old. I'm not thinking it's my mom. And so I come out of the room because my grandma tells me to sit down, and my grandpa is just like leaning over and she's bawling her eyes out, and they're like trying to talk, but they're like crying so hard, and the police are just awkwardly standing there in my grandpa's living room. And they like grab me, like they say, come here. And I'm like in the middle of both of them, like as a little kid. They're like crying all over me. And they're like, I'm like, what happened? Like, did Uncle Jason die? And they were like, no, honey, your mom killed herself this morning. They found her dead. And I was like, I've never experienced anything that made my whole being just disappear. Like I just screamed. Like when I found that sound, I was like, that's literally what happened. Like I screamed and then I ran. Like I had the flight response. I just ran into the woods behind my grandpa's house. I had cuts all over my feet because I was barefooted, and I was back there for like an hour. And I was just laying in the woods, just screaming at God because I'm a Catholic. And I was like, why would you do that to me? Like, why would she do that? And my family covered it up by telling everyone it was natural causes and it was a blood clot. They told everyone it was a blood clot. And the only reason I know for sure it was a suicide is because she called everybody the night before. And she was on, everyone at the family said like they got a call from Sarah, and she never talked to anyone in the family. And she was trying to get a hold of me, called my dad even, which she never did, and left a voicemail. My dad told me when I was older, he said he couldn't really make out what she was saying, but all she said that she's like, I love Kelsey, like I love Shayna, I love everybody, please forgive me. And that's obviously suicide, and my grandparents to this day keeps telling me that it was a blood clot. Yeah. And I went so far as to look up her obituary, and it said unknown causes on the death certificate. And it just angers me a lot because that's an insult to her memory. And even though she did commit suicide, like she was in a lot of pain.
So how do you think having that growing up, looking back at who you are now, what would you want to be able to know when you were growing up in that state?
Probably, I don't know, to be honest. I feel like if I were to know anything, it would change a lot of things. Because a lot of my choices were based off of fear in general. I feel like maybe that I would make it out and it would be okay. Because I had no one to tell me that. I had myself. And what I realized going through that is that you only have yourself at the end of the day. It doesn't matter I mean, it does matter, but it doesn't really matter who comes in your life or out of it, because you came to this world alone and you're going to leave alone. And I realized that at a young age, so I feel like everything happens for a reason. I wouldn't change it because I know that she's in a lot better place now, and I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot. That's basically why.
And I think something that I've noticed and I've experienced a little bit in my life is that sometimes when you get so beaten down by things, you make that who you are and you let that define who you are and say, all this shit that happened to me, that's who I am. How do you get yourself out of that mindset?
I have this weird coping mechanism. When I was like little, I would always pretend that it was a different me, a different reality, a different, like it was like a movie or something. I sit back and then I think about all of it, and it gets to too much sometimes, and I'm like, you know what? We're gonna put this all in a movie. Just pretend that it was a movie and you watched it somewhere, because I know I associate that with a feeling of when you just watched a movie, it's fresh in your brain and you even have dreams about it sometimes. That's what I do. And it works to get me out of panic situations. Sometimes if I think about my life too much, I like just can't, you know? But it just reminds me that just because you feel it, it doesn't mean that you're gonna feel it forever. You know, it doesn't get easier, but it does make you stronger. Yeah.
And how do you think talking about issues, not just you in particular, but if anybody in your family would have talked more about mentally what they were going through, how do you think that could help somebody?
That would have helped a lot, because I know for me, I didn't say anything because none of my family did, and it was a norm for that. And my grandpa still to this day, bless his heart, but he does never. Anytime something even slightly emotional comes up, turns his cheek. I told them when I was living with them about my dad, because no one really like knew the details. They just knew I ran away. And when I came to live with them, I told them, and they basically they gave me the vibe that they knew, and they didn't do anything. Like they tried like to get me once in a while and talk to him, but my dad didn't like him, and after that, they just never tried. And the fact that they like knew about it and turned their cheek, because they don't talk about their feelings either. They're very, very what's the word, traditional. They think you should just grow up and deal with it. And like, I don't know, it's just kind of starting with that gave us all like a vibe that we weren't allowed to talk about anything that was emotional, especially my mom. Anytime my mom gets taken, like talking about, the whole family gets in an argument. It's just really bad. But yeah.
Well, I think without a doubt, everything you've been through has definitely made you a much stronger person. And
I hope so.
I know that I don't know you, but I'm very proud of you and what you're doing. And I think you being where you are based on what you've been through is all your work. It's you that did that. No one else did that. So I really think you should give yourself a lot of credit for where you are. And I really, really appreciate you being brave enough to share the story with me, because I see so many people who come to the hospital with, I do see a lot of schizophrenia or suicide attempts or overdoses or whatever it may be, who are growing up the way you're growing up and being told, that's not true, that's fake, you're making it up, don't talk about it, you're only doing this for attention. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So I really hope that your message resonates with people, because it definitely resonated with me, and I really, really appreciate you talking to me today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out as well.
All right. Thank you, you too.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.